Today we have the pleasure of meeting and knowing and talking to a very wonderful woman in the person of Dr. Dorothy Mensah-Aggrey. Dr. Mensah-Aggrey is a woman of many talents and of many qualities. I'm sure through this conversation we would get to know her better and then take a leaf out of her page, even as we also learn to walk through this journey of life. So let's now meet Dr. Dorothy Mensah-Aggrey. Doctor, you are welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Father David.
Yes, so you are welcome to Cavdo Television. It's an honor to have you here. Last Friday on the 17th of December, we had the pleasure of joining you in launching your book. Thank you, and I'll say it again. Thank you. It was a very beautiful occasion in which you gave us a slice of your life in this particular book. And I'm sure that listeners and viewers would be very much interested in knowing what is in this book, what inspired you to write it, and then what's the way forward. So just by way of introduction, would you let us know what this book is about?
Okay. So it is about gratitude, showing and expressing gratitude to those whom you encounter in life. Many times you come across people, especially at funerals, who are really upset because they did not have the opportunity to thank people who had positively impacted their lives. And I figured, why wait till somebody dies? Why don't we express gratitude to those who are living? And so I decided that I would recount my stories. As Father said, I've been through quite a lot, but I choose to stay positive and I choose to express gratitude because, in my opinion, gratitude is actually a way of life. So that is why I put the stories together in this book.
In fact, there are very amazing stories of gratitude. But before we get to that, I'd like to go back a bit. Let's talk about your childhood and where you come from.
Okay, from Anumabo.
Okay.
Here, Agri of Anumabo. I'm from Anumabo. However, interestingly, I never lived there.
Okay.
My father was a banker and my mother was a secretary, but once the baby started coming, she became what we call a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
And due to my father's work, we traveled a lot. And so in those days, I think the regions were 9 or 10. Don't ask me how many there are today. I have to go back and learn some geography.
Okay.
And so we traveled a lot. And during those travels, people were very kind to us. And mom would always, when anybody came to the house and gave us a gift, no matter what it was, my mother would ask us, what do you say? And then we would say thank you. And it became a rhyme, because in the Agri household too, we love to sing. My dad was an organist, even before I was born. And so mom would ask, what do you say? Then we'll respond, thank you. What do you say? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So that was how I grew up learning the beautiful art of expressing gratitude.
Good. Because the day of the luncheon, as I sat back and then listened to all the beautiful stories, even before I read the book, I was wondering what actually made you such a grateful person. And I was also thinking that the apple does not fall far from the tree. So it came as no surprise that you had a chapter in the book dedicated to your parents. And I'm sure they sowed the seed of gratitude in you, and then from there you also personalized it. You integrated those qualities and made them your own. So would you share with us what life in the Agri Mensah family actually meant?
Oh, sure. Anyone who visited us, any of our friends knew that if they came to visit us on a Sunday, Mass was a given. And in fact, I enjoyed going to the choir loft with Dad when I was young because I loved music. But every day at 5 a.m., our parents woke us up to pray. We prayed daily, every day at 5 a.m. And I'm sure my sisters are going to say, did you have to say that? But it's in the book. There were times that some of us, when we were teenagers, you know, the wonderful teenage years, didn't want to wake up at 5 a.m. And yet my parents would not give in. And so that became a pattern for us. Now, what they did, which now in hindsight I think was wonderful, was each person took turns in leading prayer. And once it was your turn to lead prayer, you could lead prayer any which way. So we could read a psalm, we could sing, we could do individual prayers. So in the Aggrey household, we grew up praying every morning, and we grew up leading prayer. So praying comes naturally to me.
On that same page with your parent, I read in the book that your parents gave you the most precious gift that any parent could give to their children. So why don't you talk to us about those gifts?
Okay, now I hope I don't get emotional because my parents, I always say my parents gave us two gifts that nobody can take away from us. The first is our faith in God. Faith in the Aggrey household was everything. And the second was education. At a time, now I'm one of 10 children. We have two sets of twins, 9 girls and 1 boy. And so according to mom and dad, a number of their friends kept telling them, now why are you sending girls to school? You know, the girls' place is to cook, learn how to make a home. And my parents were like, no way. My girls would go to school, they will study, and they'll do everything anybody can do. And so my parents made sure that we went to the best schools, gave us great education, but the foundation of all that was our faith in God. And because of that, growing up also, we had lots of visitors in our home, especially clergy. I think because my dad was an organist from day one, we were always having clergy and religious in our homes, and that was a blessing to us as well.
I read that and it struck a chord with me. And I captured it, I wrote it down. I said the intangibles but enduring gifts. Those gifts that you could really not touch them, but they always remain with you. Because if somebody gave you a book, it could be lost. Somebody will be able to take it away, or maybe it gave you a dress, it will fade away or it will wear out at some point. But then the gift of faith is something that nobody can take away. The gift of education is something that somebody would not be able to take away. In fact, our Bishop Nketia has a way of saying it that you carry your certificate here and you carry your faith here, and nobody can take those things away. So I'm glad that you were able to keep those memories of the Aggrey family with you, and that you were able to share that with us. For that we are grateful.
You're welcome. And I'll add that it's like hermeneutics. So what is here comes through the heart and you live it.
That's right.
That's all.
So those are really good qualities that each and every one of us should learn to hold on to and then pass them on to the next generation, because they are the best gifts that we could ever give to anybody. And then you also have a chapter for your siblings, and then you kept mentioning them one by one. Just give us a synopsis of what it meant to live as 10 children in the same household.
It was fun.
Good.
Now, I'll say that I'm right in the middle.
Mm.
When I was young, when somebody asked me, what was your name? I would say, my name is Dorothy, and it means a gift from God. And that would irk my sisters too. But it was a lot of fun because we had our own choir. Like I said, the music, the Aggrey household was full of music. And so sometimes, especially around Christmas time and Easter, we'd go to Mass, and then the choirs would come home and would spar with them. Most days in the evening, in the morning we had our prayer, but in the evening, Dad always played the organ. And we knew he was coming to the end when he played a couple of songs. Now the Day Is Over was one of them.
Night is drawing
And
near.
yes, and we'll sing along. But there was one song that he also liked to play, and at that time I thought, Dad, why are you playing class 1 songs? Thank You for the World So Sweet. But now I can understand why he played those. And so back to the question of how it was living in the Aggrey household. Mom made sure that we took turns doing the chores in the house. Even though we had house help because of my dad's work and position, Mom always reminded us that but for the grace of God, we could be on the other side of the door.
Right.
So there was no way she would tolerate any one of us being mean to the helpers around the house. In fact, when you came to the Aggrey household, you couldn't tell who was the helper, who was, because we wore the same clothes, we ate the same food, we did the same chores. And I'm grateful for that upbringing because now I can understand that we are all made in the image and likeness of God, and there's no point looking down on anybody because you have some letters after your name or you're wealthy or whatever. It's not worth it. We are all made in the image and likeness of God.
No, I'm just looking at a household of 10 and how sometimes maybe somebody will pass down their clothes to the other person, or where sometimes you grew up in the same size with your sister or your sibling, and then you went to maybe pick up their shirt or their blouse, and then you. I'm looking at those the scenarios, but then I'm also thinking about you growing up and then later on sharing these stories with your children and how they would be able to resonate with them, because definitely you have handed on these same qualities of sharing and gratitude to your children. So how are they able to share that to their cousins and
Actually,
friends?
well, it's interesting that you bring this point up. When Dad passed on in January of 2010, my world came to a standstill.
May
In
his
fact,
soul rest in peace. And we thank
amen.
him for giving us such a beautiful daughter who is sharing these beautiful thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Mm.
And so after the burial, my siblings, so my older sister, who suggested that why don't we honor Dad through prayer, because she felt that would be the one thing that would make him really happy, where he was. We believe he was with God. And so we decided, there are 5 of us in the United States,
Okay.
that we would pray together like we used to do at home. But because of the time zone difference, that it was difficult trying to get our children up, get everybody ready, pray at 5 a.m., get them to school and all that. So we flipped the time and we decided to pray together in the evening
Right.
when we had all come back from home. Now, one sister is still in California, so she's 3 hours behind us. So what she does is after work, sometimes she'll park at a grocery shop, a gas station, wherever she can park, and then she'll join us in prayer. But we pray with our children. And the same methodology we used at home, we allowed every child to be the leader. And it's amazing that when you allow children, when you give them this opportunity, the scripture passages that they would, bring forth, sometimes we go, wow, so this is in the Bible? And my daughter would look at me like, Mom, aren't you the one with a degree? And so I'm just grateful for the fact that we've been able to share this with our children, and they are also living this out.
Okay. Another chapter that you touched on in your book is that the chapter about the sacred foundations of relevance, of gratitude. And you talked about the 10 lepers and how one of them came back to express gratitude, and how that was a moment of pause and reflection for you about the need to express gratitude. Can you share your thoughts on that one with us?
Sure. Would you like me to read?
That would be
It's on page
beautiful.
4.
Okay.
And so now we know most people who have studied scripture know that the Jews and the Samaritans were like water and oil, no mix. And so for Jesus to heal them, and then for the one person to return and give Christ, the glory, express his gratitude, meant a lot. What struck me was the fact that when Jesus told them to just go and show themselves to the priest, they obeyed. And yet, When they were cured on the way there, only one realized that he had been fully cured and decided to go back and express his gratitude to Jesus, who had gifted them this wonderful gift of healing. And I began to ask myself, so what is it that holds people back from expressing gratitude? I had the opportunity of meeting, going back to the nuncio, the apostolic nuncio, yesterday to thank him for being at
The book launch, yes.
the launch. And we were talking about that. And so he was sharing that he suggested, well, Dorothy, why don't you do some research into the psychology of those who do not know how to express gratitude? What is it that holds people back? Now, I have a theory, and I
Okay.
don't know whether it is true or not, but you know, in life, some people feel entitled.
Okay.
And so they think, well, this, you know, this should be mine anyway. You know, I'm at this level, I'm here, so who cares? What most people forget is you may feel as entitled as you wish. All it takes is for God to say, I'm taking that breath of life away from you. It's a second. And you'll be like clay. And so if you could remember that, then we'd realize that whatever it is we have, our health, whatever gifts we've been blessed with, all come from God. That way, we would continuously give thanks to God. Every minute, every moment will be a life of thanksgiving. So that is how I see it. So let me read a little bit of what I wrote here. Um, and I explained the story of the 9 lepers who did not show gratitude to Christ is a constant reminder of the importance of the civil act, of showing appreciation. And here are a few points to consider. Showing gratitude points to a thoughtful process and acknowledgement of the personhood of the giver of the gift, and whoever the gifter may be. Returning to express gratitude shows a binding connection of the giver and receiver of the gift. So there's a common factor.
Right.
This gift that you give to me or I give to you, and I acknowledge that. And then expressing gratitude is acknowledging both the giver of the gift and the gift. And so when we do that, we say, thank you, God, for my health, for my children, for my work. Even sometimes the little nuances, the little things that annoy us lead us to greater heights.
That's right.
And so that's why 2 Thessalonians 5, 18 says, give thanks to God in all things.
In all things.
It doesn't say only when things are going right, but in all things.
No, it is beautiful when you express it that the giver of the gift, the recipient of the gift, and the gift unite all of us. Elsewhere, you express it as appreciation or gratitude uplifting us. That it uplifts the person who is able to say thank you, whilst at the same time it affirms or confirms and uplifts the person who receives that act of gratitude. So it's what the sociologists will call the functional reciprocity. It's something that mutually we all benefit from. So in learning to say thank you, it's an act of humility, it's an act of gratitude, but then at the same time it makes me become a better person. And then the person who is also the recipient of that gesture of gratitude also knows and acknowledges that my act has been appreciated, and it eggs me on to be able to do more. So it's a beautiful concept that you brought out in the book, and I'm very, very happy that you are helping us to be able to reflect on some of these basic human gestures that we should have at our fingertips every day and every moment of our lives. We are very grateful.
You're welcome. Actually, when I came down, I decided to call Archbishop Emeritus Peter Sapon, because when we were young, we lived in Kumasi for a while,
Okay.
and he was one of the clergy. He was a bishop then, I remember, who used to come to the house. And I recall that one day they came, he and a number of priests came over for lunch. And after lunch, he said to my dad, I was about 9 or 10, but I remember that, oh, Mr. Aggrey, you and Mrs. Aggrey are so kind to us. if you ever knew life, you know, that meant a lot to me. Because at that time I thought, oh, Bishop, telling mom and dad, they can ask him for anything. And so when I came, I called him and I told him that I had written about him in the book. I was surprised at his expression of gratitude. It blew me away, you know. And so I told him I would send a copy to him. And so what you're saying, it's right on point. When somebody thanks you, you uplift the person, but you, the one who are thanking this other person, you also gain something. It lifted my mood.
That's right.
That day, because I was having a very bad day that afternoon, but I thought I'll call anyway, and it changed my mood. So what you're saying, it's right on target.
No, we thank God that you help us to be able to reflect on some of these things that sometimes we take for granted. Because you also made a connection between memory and gratitude. You see how far you have gone to when you were about 9 years old. You recall something and it still fills your heart with gratitude. Some of us easily forget. Some of us just gloss over the event. Some of us just shelve it and we don't really put any importance to it. But that connection that you establish between memory and gratitude, I think is something that we should underline, because if we don't forget and we see the importance of it and then we carry that one with us in the course of life, we would begin to appreciate how that simple gesture maybe in the past has stayed on with us or has propelled us into the future, and it may be a motivating factor for us. Leads me to my next question. You mentioned that you've been working on this for the past 5 or 6 years. Is it really true, or that was when you actually began writing? Because I see that you go way back. Have you been taking notes, or how did you get all the stories from the past?
No, actually, it's been about 5 years. When there's a chapter on medicine, medical health,
Yes.
and so I think I mentioned during the launch that I had been very ill, underwent a series of surgeries, and the doctors and nurses were really wonderful to me. There was one particular doctor, Dr. Ruff, and he's Catholic, and so when I go to see him, he would deliberately start, discussing theology
Right.
to distract me, and I appreciated that. And so I would share with people that people have been so kind to me, and I want to express it. So it's interesting, but I had a dream that my dad was telling me, "You keep saying you are grateful, you are grateful. Why don't you write it down?" This was around 2015. My dad had been gone about 5 years,
Okay.
and so I decided I would start writing. And so I just try to remember. I have a pretty good memory,
Good. I can tell that
especially
from the
when
book.
somebody is kind to me. And so I started recalling some of the stories. Now I had to ask permission from a number of people to include their stories. And almost everybody, when I said I'm writing a book about gratitude, like, "Oh, great, thank you for thanking me." And I said, "No, I'm grateful that you're allowing me to share your story." For instance, this page you've turned to, my friend Leonie and her husband, Mr. Seshiri Abankwa.
Yes.
I mean, I cannot stop thanking them enough. In this day, I arrive from wherever I'm coming from. They will send a driver to pick me up at the airport. They'll have a room ready for me. Wherever I'm going. Coming here today, they had a driver bring me here, and they would not take anything. How can you live life without saying thank you to such a wonderful couple? You can't. Your own, former Archbishop Cardinal Turkson, he's been supportive of me since I was a young lady studying at the University of Cape Coast. He's been there for me, for my children. How can you not say thank you to such a person? And so it just, I think it comes naturally, and I'm grateful because I have gained a lot from just expressing my gratitude to people. So
It is beautiful that you recall all these stories. But then I also noticed that your recollection did not mean just an abstract recollection. It's something that transitioned into a concrete gesture. So when I saw the artwork at the back of the book, and then each chapter where you bring in the pictures of your friends and then the moments that you shared, what I wrote down is that gratitude has a face,
Yes.
and you have given gratitude a face. And it is not just any face, it's a familiar face. Gratitude is the person next to me, it's the person who shares this moment with me. So, for us to be able to transition from thinking abstractly of gratitude to the concrete gesture of saying it and then realizing it and then giving it a face, that was my reason why earlier on I made a comment that I would wish that you turn the black and white pictures into colored, let them pop out, and let us be able to see their faces and then the colors and then everything, because I think that's exactly what you have done. You need to turn the flip the page, let it see them. So these are not just pictures, these are pictures of the people who have been supportive of you in one way or the other, and whose faces you still remember and then you put a picture to. And so once again, I just want to say thank you for giving gratitude a face, and it is really beautiful. They're talking about you receiving a lot of support and help and assistance from many people. You also dedicated a chapter to mentors and mentees.
Yes.
And I was particularly touched by the principal of the Takoradi Workers College School. I didn't want to just tell the story. You tell us what happened.
So I like music
Okay.
now, and I do compose. I've composed quite a bit. So anyone who composes music knows that there's some amount of math in composing music. I used to like math until I felt that my math teacher was being partial, so then I took a dislike to math. So when I sat for my O levels, I didn't do very well in math, and I couldn't move on to sixth form. And so I had to go in and do some remedial classes at Takoradi Workers College. And I remember when I walked in that day, I was downcast. I was really upset. And I went to the principal's office. I can't remember why I went to the principal's office, but I was there. And he noticed it. And so he asked me why I was upset, and I told him. And I remember him telling me that I shouldn't be upset, that I think he had a copy of my grades, but you do very well in English. You've done very well in other subjects. And remember, every failure or every misfortune is a blessing. And I thought, what do you mean, every misfortune? You know, is it a blessing that I didn't go to sixth form and my mates are in sixth form and I'm here taking remedial classes? Because you also in school, you know, there's that part where you feel you didn't do so well, so it's not that people are laughing at you or ridiculing you.
Tells you about your self-esteem.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't understand why he said every misfortune is a blessing. But if I could find that principle today, I would thank him. And because what he said to me stuck with me, and through life, I have gone through other, you know, certain events, and that sentence, what he shared with me, I always remember that. And so I look at what has happened and I say, okay, instead of looking at an obstacle or something as a hurdle, it becomes a stepping stone for me to move from one level to the other. And so that is how he helped me deal with that situation.
It resonates with many people. And in fact, this just before we came, I was driving with some friends, and I was sharing some of the pages that I have read with them. And I said I could particularly identify with that. Because when I was in the US, I failed my driving test.
I did too. You don't want to know what I did the third time around.
No, it's it was something that, looking back, I felt it had been life-saving. The gentleman who went on the driving test with me told me that I committed two mistakes that could be fatal. That I didn't know my blind side. So when I was driving, I couldn't turn and then see my blind side. I was just using the driving wheel and then changing lanes. And then coming from Ghana, you know sometimes how we reverse. I turned back and I looked like this. And so, so, so they failed me. And then I went back, hurt emotionally and then pride. So I felt that my ego issues were there. And the gentleman said, "You come back in 2 weeks." So I went back, I did my homework, and then I went back and I passed. Later on, I realized that I had been saved several times because I learned about the blind spot.
Yes.
One glaring example was when I came back to Ghana. I was driving from 4th Ridge to 3rd Ridge where they have a car washing bay. So I had shown the indicator that I was going on the left, and then I was supposed to turn. But before I turned, I looked at the side. There was this driver overtaking at a top speed. So, but for the head turn, I would have gone. But then immediately I remembered that the driver, the examiner failed me because of the blind spot. And it became a blessing at that moment. So every failure is a blessing in disguise. And we should learn to be grateful in all circumstances, not only in the good moments, but even in the bad moments, we should learn to be grateful. So thanks for sharing all those thoughts, beautiful thoughts with us. There was something that I wanted you to share with us, which is also another beautiful quotation that you made. It says, "Feeling gratitude and not expressing it is like wrapping a gift and not giving it to the person."
Yes.
Share your thoughts on that one.
It's interesting. When I launched this book virtually last September,
Okay.
and it was one of the, what I do is at the end of every chapter, I place a quotation there. So this was a quotation there. I didn't know that my son was reading another book, and so he decided to share towards the end of the virtual launch, and he quoted the same. And so later on, I asked him, and he said, "Yeah, mommy," because the three of us are very close, my children and I. Well, when you wrap a gift and you don't give it to the person and it just sits there, the person doesn't know that you care about him or her, that you love him or her. So the gift will be sitting there. And that is, to me, that is what gratitude is. When somebody has gone out of their way to show you some form or act of kindness, and you assume that the person knows that you are grateful, and so you do not express your gratitude in any way. In my opinion, it's similar to wrapping a gift and placing it on your table, leaving it there. The person to whom you were going to present the gift is out there, and the gift will still be on your table. There's no connection. However, when you present that gift, when you give something, if I'm giving you this book, you will not receive it with a fist. You would open your palm.
Right.
Now, opening your palm to receive something, that act of reception already creates a connection. And so when we express gratitude to individuals, to people, there's a kind of relationship that is built.
Okay.
And I believe in my own life, in my life, I think that is what has helped me build better relationships with those whom I have encountered.
Dear viewers, I think we are all learning a lot. I said that Dr. Dorothy Mensah-Aggrey is a woman of many colors. She wears many hats. She is a lecturer, she is a mother, she is a friend, she is a sister, and many things. But in all these situations, she is able to keep that positive spirit and then share those positive stories with us. In fact, I was touched when I read from your prologue that you have taken gratitude or teaching people to express gratitude as a mission.
Yes, I have.
And I underlined it in the book that why would gratitude become your mission?
Well, as I explained earlier on, when I got sick, when I underwent all those surgeries, there was one during one of them, I had an experience, an out-of-body experience. And the question I kept asking myself when I came around was, so why didn't I die? Why was I spared? A very good friend of mine who had come over to give me a hand lost her sister, I think a year or so afterwards. And that even caused me to think deeper. So why was I spared? And as I was, writing the stories of this book, eventually it dawned on me that if this is my purpose, if I was spared so that I could help others understand the concept, the depth, the meaning of expressing gratitude first to God, because without God, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be who I am. I have the breath of life because of God. So gratitude always goes to God first, and then to those around me. So if I could make that my mission and help people to understand the importance of expressing gratitude to persons in their lives, then I would say thank you, God.
Very good. Because by writing this book, I think you have begun accomplishing that mission. Because it's a selfless way of leading us into some intimate part of your life. And you did that graciously. And so my next question is, what follows after this book?
Okay, actually, I've already began it. So I had meant to talk about the gratitude movement during the book launch, but I didn't because the gentleman helping me with the website hadn't completed it, but
Okay.
it is done now. So in September, I had a conference, a gratitude movement conference, and there were about 90 people who participated from all the continents, actually.
Mm.
And so at the end of the conference, we agreed that each person who participated in the conference would recall to mind at least one person who has impacted their lives and seek out that person. If the person has been called to eternal glory, they can try and find some relative of that person and share with them the story. Now, if the person is alive and they're able to locate the person, they should then express to the person what it was that this person did for them and why, the reason for their gratitude. And then try and share that experience with us. They can capture that experience whether in a picture or write a paragraph, a page, a poem. I like poetry.
I know.
And then send it back to me so that I will create an anthology of gratitude.
Okay.
And I think that once we do that, because I think once somebody expresses gratitude to you, you then remember, so whom have I thanked? And it's also the reason why at the end of each chapter, I have those series of questions.
Yeah, I'm looking at them. My gratitude goes to
Yes. And
my thoughts and actions. Whom have I thanked today? Who do I need to thank today?
Yes.
And who has thanked me today?
Yes. If every day we can go through these sort of questions, I believe that by the end of the week or a month, we would be living that attitude of gratitude, and it will make a difference in the world. I mean, look at the world today. Look at, the United States. There's so much hatred, but you won't have time for hatred if all you're thinking is the good things people have done for you, and all you're thinking about is how do I express gratitude to A, B, C, and D. You won't have time for hatred. So I believe that if we could flip things, and instead of complaining and backbiting and slander, name it, all the different things we do that are not right, if we could replace these with acts of kindness and gratitude, the world would be a better place, I think.
So I think that is also the mission, making the world a better place through the expression of gratitude. And I'm glad that you are coming up with a gratitude movement and then helping people to be able to note down and then tell the stories of their act of gratitude. One thing that I also felt after reading the book is that this is not a book that you read and put away. It's a book that you have to read and go back to every now and again. And sometimes it's something that you can even keep by your bedside and then remind yourself and then go through some of the pages to see whether you are actually living this attitude or a lifestyle of gratitude. Shifting from the book and then shifting from the gratitude movement, I know you also hold that program, Whispers of Love,
Yes.
praying with poetry. And I have had the occasion to share some of the videos with my friends. And you have received a lot of positive comments, and I just want you to know that people write saying that they are very inspirational, that they are something that they would always want to go back to and then reflect on some of the poems because you give that poem life, and it's a very beautiful thing. So we will popularize that page too. I have linked it up with the Cavdo page, and we'll try and then see how we'll be able to give you a slot also on the TV, so you can do this more of the Whispers of Love. But
That's
tell us a
wonderful.
little bit about
About the Whispers of
yes,
Love?
yes.
Oh, I'm sure Father Martin would have a kick out of this. So I went to a conference in Rome, and before going to the conference, I had sent a letter from my office to Archbishop Bruno Feisikela,
Okay.
who is a prefect or the president of the Office for New Evangelization, that I'd like to interview him. And he had agreed. So a date and time was set. The morning of the interview, I went there with Father Ignatius took me there. And when we got there, the Archbishop was not in. So Father Martin, who happens to work there, came out to explain why the Archbishop was not there and said he had called me. And I thought, he called me? There's no number. I don't see anything on my phone. But anyway, he was smiling through, and I was having an attitude.
Mm.
But anyway, he smiled through it all. So somehow we managed to exchange cards. So when I gave him my card and he looked at it, he goes, "Oh, my diocese works with you." So I looked at him and said, "But you are in Rome." No, and said, "No, he used to be in New York." And so that started it. I came back and I realized that indeed he had called the office number
Right.
and left a message. And I felt terrible. So I sent a note to apologize. And he still was very pleasant. And so he sent me a poem. Like, "I write poetry, read this, and I hope you like it." That was the beginning of it. I read it and I fell in love with it.
Mm.
And so I told him, "Father, when I was young, I used to write poetry. But after a few hard knocks, I just put it aside." And he said, "No, write. Poetry is another way of expressing gratitude to God. So write." And so we began exchanging poems. And during Lent of 2020, that was when the pandemic had hit so bad. And we were working from home. And people would call, I would talk to them. And one day I just thought, what? Why don't I just share this poetry? And so I started reciting the poetry. And I used to act when I was in Ghana before going to the US to study.
Okay.
And so that came into motion, and I started reciting the poetry. But I thought, I'm a teacher by profession. And so whenever I have the opportunity to turn things around and use them as teaching moments, I enjoy those. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to recite the poetry, I could very well add one or two snippets or something to make them teaching moments. So that's how they came about.
In fact, they are very lovely. The introduction, the background stories, the poems that you select, and then the prayers that accompany them. You let them become enfleshed, and that is really, really wonderful. So
Thank you so
I
much.
commend you for doing it, and then you have our prayerful support in whatever you do. And if you have any final thoughts, maybe you share those with us before we say goodbye to our viewers.
Okay. Yes. So what I would suggest is take a few moments, whether you want to do that in the morning or in the evening before you go to bed. Think about any one person who has impacted your life. Write down what it was that happened, and then begin to write a note, an expression of gratitude to the person. Try and do that every day. Then you can write your own story, and you begin to live a life of gratitude, and you would notice the change in your life. I can promise you that.
I'm just thinking of this one. Count your blessings one by one.
Yes, that's the story.
That is a life of gratitude. So, dear viewers, as I said, we are very privileged to have Dr. Dorothy Mensah-Aggrey with us. It's been very pleasant having you here, and it's been very refreshing hearing your story, and then very educative, and learning about gratitude. We are very grateful to you.
Thank you
We
for
thank you for leading this conversation on gratitude, and we do look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you for
God
that,
bless
David.
you.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you
David.
so very
I'm grateful that you had me here.
Okay, goodbye, viewers. We look forward to seeing you again. Bye.
With a grateful heart, give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because He's given Jesus Christ, His Son. Give thanks with a great